Today on Zoo Clues, we'll investigate some incredible animal tales. Discover why some animals have them and some don't. Plus, we'll learn how to tell what your pet is thinking just by looking at its tail. Discover why zebrafish are much more than ordinary fish. And expose the secret that peacocks don't want you to know. All this and much more coming up now on Zoo Clues. The adventure starts here and leads us into the wild and everywhere else animals live. We'll ask questions and discover the answers. Let the investigation begin. This is Zoo Clues. Almost every animal we encounter has a tail. But did you ever stop to wonder how the tail got there in the first place? Not all tails are equal either. A horse and squirrel both have them, but a squirrel tail is way more awesome and useful than a horse's tail. Don't believe us? Can a horse's tail keep it warm? Nope. Can a horse's tail keep the snow off its head? Oh, and can a horse's tail help it balance when it climbs trees? That last one's a maybe. We've never seen a horse climb a tree, yet. You can tell important information about a dog just by looking at its tail. It seems pretty simple, too. Tail wags, dog's happy. Tail tucked, dog's not happy. Let's see if that's all there is to it by asking our first question. True or false? Dogs wag their tails to the right when they feel happy. Here's your clue. Dogs express a ton of emotion through their body language. So other dogs can tell when they're happy or not. The answer is true. Scientists studying animal behavior discovered that dogs wag their tails mostly to the right when they're happy. Well, the scientists call it positive emoting, but it's pretty much happy. On the other hand, leftward tail wagging is usually done by dogs experiencing a negative emotion like fear. Now here's the interesting part. Scientists still aren't sure if a happy dog wags its tail to the right on purpose or if that's just what happy dogs do. So if you've got a pet dog, keep your eye on that tail and do some science. Dogs aren't the only animal to show their emotion using their tail. Here's one that's pretty much unmistakable, a rattlesnake tail. It's pretty clear what emotion is on display here, fear. But here's a question, true or false? The rattlesnake is the only snake that shakes its tail in warning. Here's your clue, which is actually a question. Which came first, the shaking or the rattle? The shaking, of course. That's why the answer is false. Rattlesnakes aren't the only snakes that shake their tail when frightened. In fact, most other pit vipers do it too. But the rattlesnake is one of the only snakes that have a rattle. So if a rattle serves as a kind of warning, why would a rattleless snake bother to shake its tail? We'll get to the bottom of that in a minute. But first, here's a quick question about the rattlesnake. What is the name of the first rattle on a baby rattlesnake's tail? Is it a bean, a button, a bell, or a buckle? Here's your clue. Baby rattlesnakes are super cute, way cuter than a buckle or even a bean. The answer is button. The little nub of a rattle on a baby rattlesnake is called a button. But let's get back to those rattleless snakes. Can you think of a reason a snake might shake its tail when it gets scared? It's because the most important part of the snake is its head. If a predator attacks a snake's tail, the snake has a much better chance of escaping alive. So some snakes shake their tail to trick a predator into biting it there instead of its head. Lizards are similar to snakes when it comes to their tails. But they take it one horrific step further with something scientists call autotomy. We call it self-amputation. Wait, no, let's call it dropping tail. That sounds way better. Now, let's take a look at some lizards dropping tail with our next question. What's the maximum time a lizard's tail can wiggle if it falls off? Is it 30 seconds or 30 minutes? Here's your clue. If a lizard can't escape in that much time, it's got some serious problems. The answer is 30 minutes. Yep, some lizards have an entire half hour to escape while their tail flails around behind them. Now, a question might have just popped into your brain like it popped into ours. Does a lizard feel pain when it loses its tail? Here's your clue. Most lizards' tails develop specifically to fall off. The answer is no. Lizards don't feel any pain when their tails fall off. They have powerful muscles that squeeze down weak spots on the tail, like a perforated part of the bone. When the tail breaks off, the lizard's body immediately goes into repair mode. First, it closes up the wound, and then releases growth chemicals to stimulate the base of the tail to regrow. The growth area is sometimes called a button. Now, unfortunately for the lizard, the new tail isn't quite as good as the old one. It's more like a generic imitation of the original. Plus, some lizards can only drop tail once, while others totally lucked out and can do multiple drops. Lizard tails are even being studied by scientists trying to regrow human cells and organs. Reptile tails are pretty versatile. Some are even prehensile. That means they can grab stuff with it, which works great for keeping chameleons from falling out of trees. That tail trait also helps another animal tame the trees. Now it's time to take another tail test. Here's your question. True or false? When an opossum sleeps, it hangs upside down by its tail. Here's your clue. Since the opossum is a marsupial, a pouch full of baby opossums can get really heavy. The answer is false. The opossum is a great climber and uses its prehensile tail to grab branches for balance. But its tail is far too weak to support its entire weight. And if the mother has a pouch full of babies, that tail doesn't stand a chance. Coming up next, we'll investigate some of the most amazing tail adaptations in the animal world. But first, let's see if you can guess the name of this mystery animal. The answer coming up next on Zoo Clues. Time to reveal our mystery animal. Do you think you know what it is? It's a peacock. This bird's got one of the most recognizable tails in the animal kingdom. Even with that huge tail, the peacock can still take flight. It's not easy with all that extra weight, but it's 100% better than being an ostrich. The male peacock uses those gigantic feathers as a courtship display. That's the animal equivalent of a boy hoping a girl will marry him just because his tuxedo is incredible. Nice tuxedo. You'd think that a female peacock would never fall for something like that, but they do, all the time. In fact, that's why those tail displays are so enormous in the first place. Because girl peacocks always end up marrying the boys with the fancy tails. Well, sorta. But you know what? That male peacock's got a secret. A secret so big that it would change the peacock world forever if the females ever found out. So what's the secret, you ask? Well, first, let's take a look at all that cool blue coloration. Depending on which angle you look from, the feathers on a peacock tail appear to glow blue and green. That glow is called iridescence. And it's also why every peacock you see is a total phony. Let's investigate with a question. True or false? A peacock's tail feathers are actually brown. Here's your clue. Pigments look like the same color from all angles. But remember that peacock feathers are iridescent. That means their color comes from the structure of the feather itself, not from the blue pigment. That's right, peacock, we're calling you out. Your tail feathers aren't really blue, they're brown. Sorry. Ha ha. You see, peacocks use a trick of physics called structural coloration. Here's how it works. White light is a combination of all of the colors. We can see this using a prism. A normal flat surface, like a banana, reflects back only the color yellow. But the surface of a peacock's feathers isn't flat. It's made up of tiny little structures that reflect light at different angles. That's why, depending on which angle you look at it, a peacock's feathers can appear to be different shades of blue and green. So, brown-colored pigment combined with structural coloration is what makes peacocks look so cool. It's also what makes hummingbirds look so cool. They use structural coloration too and produce some of the most interesting color displays. But if we take a look at the hummingbird's tail, we find something just as interesting. Let's discover more with a question. How many feathers are in a hummingbird's tail? 10, 50, or 150? Here's your clue. Each feather in a bird's tail adds extra weight. Hummingbirds are some of the lightest, quickest birds around. The answer is 10. A hummingbird's tail has 10 feathers. Sometimes those feathers can be super long in males, and they're used just like the peacock uses its feathers, to attract lady hummingbirds. Okay, so maybe the hummingbird's tail feathers don't look all glorious like the peacock's. But there's a secret lurking somewhere in those tail feathers, and it's a game changer when it comes to finding a mate. You know where this is going, right? Yep. Here's another question. To find a mate, what do male hummingbirds do with their tail? Is it hunt crickets, stun bees, or play music? Here's your clue. Hummingbirds hardly ever touch the ground, which is where most of the crickets are. The answer is play music. When a male hummingbird wants to get a mate's attention, it flies up, then goes into a dive. Right near the bottom of the dive, the bird spreads its 10 tail feathers wide, and the wind speed causes them all to vibrate and produce sound. Different feather sizes make different sounds, and most species have tail songs all their own. Amazingly, the songs made by the tail are usually much louder than the sounds they can make with their mouth. Aside from playing songs and looking awesome, what else do tails do for birds? A ton, actually. Birds use their tails mainly for flying. Tail feathers do the same thing as a steering rudder on a boat. When a bird needs to make a turn, it fans out its tail feathers and banks in the direction of the turn. When landing, a fanned-out tail slows the bird down and helps it stabilize and balance on branches. So given all that, here's a question for you. True or false? A bird can fly without its tail. Here's your clue. It almost seems like birds learned a trick or two from lizards. The answer is true. Only the worst birds in the world can't fly without their tail feathers. We're looking at you, ostrich. But not for long, because you're the worst. In fact, some birds can actually drop their tail feathers when threatened, almost like a lizard. So birds can definitely fly with just their wings. But without a tail, it makes things incredibly difficult. There's good news for the bird, though. Those dropped feathers do eventually regrow in 4 to 6 weeks. They just have to endure being teased by all the other birds until then. Coming up next, we'll meet the fastest shark in the ocean. And we'll investigate the fascinating way lobsters escape predators. But first, let's see if you can guess the name of this mystery animal. The answer coming up next on Zoo Clues. Time to reveal our mystery animal. Do you think you know what it is? It's a tadpole. It consists of a large, awkward head and a long tail that whips back and forth in order to swim. The tadpole's tail is a fascinating work of biology. It goes from being totally necessary for survival to being completely useless and disappearing. So how does it perform this disappearing act? Better yet, why does it disappear? Think about it like this. Frog eggs are a delicacy in nature. They're like little delicious energy pills for fish and other animals. So nature needs to get that frog hatched and fending for itself as soon as possible. No time for legs to develop, just use a tail until the legs grow in. Problem solved. When they hatch, they can swim and escape predators while their bodies are building their brand new legs. That's done by a process called apoptosis. Imagine the tail locked in place while the tadpole's body and limbs keep growing. The tail is absorbed as the body grows bigger. Fascinating. Even more fascinating, though, is the shape of the tadpole's tail. See how the fin is up and down? It's got a vertical fin, just like a fish. Look at that shark's tail fin. See how its thin vertical tail fin moves when it moves? That undulating motion is used by most fish to swim. Let's investigate the shark's tail a little further with a question. The fastest shark clocks in at almost 50 miles per hour. So, which shark is it? Is it the great white shark, the blue shark, the mako shark, or the nurse shark? Here's your clue. The nurse shark is a nocturnal bottom-feeding fish. Bottom feeding favors a slower, more patient approach to hunting, so it's not the nurse shark. The answer is mako shark. Mako sharks are the perfect combination of size and shape, and they slice through the water at incredible speeds. That powerful tail and super speed enable it to catch prey by surprise and chase it down if it tries to escape. How does it maneuver so well? It can change the angle and stiffness of its tail fin to adjust to almost any swimming situation. A nurse shark wouldn't stand a chance in a shark race, but that's okay. It wouldn't care as long as it was chilling on the bottom, munching on a crustacean. Since we're on the topic of crustacean tails, how could we not mention the lobster? Unfortunately for the lobster, lots of humans find its tail to be absolutely delicious. Here's a question. How many tons of lobster does the entire world eat in 1 year? Is it 12 million, 2 million, or 1 million? Here's your clue. We said tons, and a ton is 2,000 pounds. Even though that's a ton of pounds, we have to remember that there are billions of people on Earth. That's why the answer is 12 million tons. That's a lot of lobster. While lobsters still haven't figured out how to escape from the traps of their human nemesis, they do have an amazing way to escape from most other things. When a lobster feels threatened, which direction does it swim to escape? Is it forwards, backwards, or sideways? Here's your clue. One of the reasons people think lobster tails taste so good is because they're packed with powerful muscles. When a lobster is threatened, those muscles contract extremely fast. So fast that it snaps the tail into a U shape. That snap instantly sends the lobster jetting backwards and away from danger. Other crustaceans use the same escape reaction when there's danger near. One of the most fascinating things about the tail flip is the fact that it's mostly involuntary. All it takes is a touch in the right spot to set it off. But nature provided an override. You see, if the lobster is busy eating, its body short-circuits the tail flip response. That way, it won't risk losing out on dinner if its tail has a misfire. Here's one last question. How wide can a blue whale's tail grow? Is it 8 feet, 15 feet, or 25 feet? Here's your clue. If a whale offered to use its tail to shade you from the sun, you could park half of your school bus underneath. The answer is 25 feet. That's big, really big. Big enough to knock your boat over if you got too close, so you might want to steer clear. Say hello to our fine feathered friend, the woodpecker. We've already looked at some interesting bird tails, but the woodpecker's tail is pretty unique in the bird world. Look at this woodpecker. Do you see what it does with its tail? The woodpecker uses its tail like a kickstand, kind of like how a kangaroo uses its tail. The woodpecker's tail feathers are specially adapted for strength and stiffness. That's because the woodpecker needs them for leverage when it's pecking. As the woodpecker grips the tree with its feet, it sits back on its tail feathers, which takes some of the weight off its feet. That gives the woodpecker extra leverage so it can bang its face into the tree even harder. Most birds would break their tail feathers if they tried to do what the woodpecker does all day long. It's like having a built-in chair, and that's pretty cool. Don't go away, Zoo Clues will be right back. Well, we're out of time again, but we'll be back next week with more brain-busting animal questions and their amazing answers on Zoo Clues. See you then!
Ooh.